The last favor. What would you do if someone asked for one last favor, but it could ruin your life? David had left his old life behind. A successful marketing director now, he had worked hard to build the career, the house, and the reputation he always wanted. But one phone call from a voice he hadn't heard in years threatened to tear it all apart. Jake, his childhood best friend, was in trouble again. Only this time, it wasn't small-time mistakes or bad decisions. Jake was desperate.
I need you, man.
Just one last favor. Against his better judgment, David agreed to meet him. Jake Harrison. David hadn't spoken to him in over a decade. They'd grown up together, and back then, Jake was like a brother. Always getting into trouble, but fiercely loyal. When David's father died when he was 18, it was Jake who pulled him through the darkest time of his life. But Jake's life had taken a different path. Always on the edge of the law, always gambling, always in some kind of mess. David had distanced himself as their lives took opposite directions, but now Jake needed him. I wouldn't call if I wasn't desperate, Dave.
I swear.
Just one last favor, and I'm out of this mess for good. Against his better judgment, David agreed to meet Jake. After all, he owed him for all those times Jake had been there for him. But something about Jake's voice on the phone unsettled him. He sounded cornered, desperate. They met at a small diner on the edge of town, far from David's polished corporate world. Jake looked older than his 35 years, the toll of bad decisions etched into his face. He was jittery, eyes darting around the room. I'm in deep with some bad people, Dave, Jake began, glancing nervously at the door. It's not what you think. I didn't do anything illegal. I just borrowed some money to invest. It went bad. Now they're after me, but I can fix it. David leaned back in his chair, skeptical. He had heard these kinds of stories before. So, what do you need from me? Jake slid a folder across the table. I need you to go to a meeting in my place. It's nothing shady, I swear. You're just there to negotiate a deal. These guys won't listen to me anymore, but they know you. You've got the business smarts I don't. David flipped open the folder. Inside were documents, a rundown of some startup business that Jake had apparently invested in. It wasn't a total scam, but it wasn't the kind of deal David would ever be involved in. Still, it didn't seem illegal. You want me to vouch for you? David asked, a sinking feeling growing in his gut. Jake's eyes were pleading. Just one meeting. It's all I need to get back on my feet. After this, I'm out. I promise. Against his better judgment, David agreed. The meeting was set for the following week, in a high-end restaurant downtown. David arrived dressed in his usual sharp suit, but from the moment he walked in, he knew this wasn't going to be as simple as Jake had made it sound. The business partners were slick, intimidating men, clearly not the type you'd want to cross. David kept his cool, explaining Jake's position and trying to negotiate an extension on the loan repayment. But the conversation took a darker turn. One of the men leaned forward, his voice low and threatening. This isn't just about the money, Mr. Mathers. Your friend made promises he couldn't keep. Now, someone has to pay. David tried to backtrack, but it was too late. Jake hadn't just borrowed money. He had sold them something far more valuable, a connection into David's world. They knew about his company, his position, and his upcoming merger, and they were going to use him to get what they wanted. Back at his apartment, David was furious. He called Jake, but his friend didn't answer. Jake had dragged him into something far more dangerous than he'd let on. He realized now that this wasn't about friendship, it was about survival. The threats began almost immediately. Anonymous messages, strange cars parked outside his house. At work, David found himself cornered. An inside mole had been placed in his company, and now the deal he was about to close was under threat. The very life he had built was hanging by a thread, all because he had agreed to do Jake one last favor. Desperate, David confronted Jake, finally tracking him down at a rundown motel. Jake looked broken, remorseful, but it was too late. I didn't know it would go this far, man. I thought I could fix it. I swear, I didn't mean for you to get caught up in this. But David had heard enough. You made your choice, Jake. Now I have to make mine. David had two options. Either give in to the demands of Jake's partners and compromise everything he had worked for, or turn Jake in and cut him out of his life for good. Knowing that his life, career, and future were on the line, David made his decision. He approached the authorities and exposed the entire operation, offering up Jake's role in exchange for protection. Jake was arrested, and the syndicate was dismantled. In the end, David lost his friend, but saved his life. The cost was high, his relationship with Lily was strained, his company narrowly escaped scandal, and trust became something he struggled with. But one thing was clear: there would be no more favors. David's decision left him feeling both relieved and hollow. He had always thought loyalty was about standing by the people who had stood by you. But this time, it nearly cost him everything. Sometimes the hardest choices are the ones that save you. Would you do one last favor if it meant losing everything? David's answer was clear: never again. This story explores the tension between loyalty and self-preservation, the costs of helping someone who won't help themselves, and also the danger of letting the past control your future.